So the Pokemon market is currently within a frenzy with prices and how much demand is being seen. These kind of levels of popularity for Pokemon cards have not been seen since the Evolving Skies days, and we are right now in another hype period. So what's happened is there's a lot of things that's happened in the Pokemon world at the moment. So, if you've just re-entered the hobby, there's a lot of things happening, right? So we had Pokemon TCG Pocket, which is a new mobile game that's kind of brought in a lot of people back to collecting. It's a really simplified version of the game where you've got like a digital landscape of collecting, and it's really popular, right? And that's bringing a lot of people who are now coming to the physical card game as well. And of course, you've got Surging Sparks, which is released, which is pretty much sold out everywhere. You need to pay overs to get the product. And now you've got Prismatic Evolutions, which is coming out next year, which is essentially Evolving Skies 2.0. It's another evolution themed set. All these things combined have created an insane demand of Pokemon cards. And throughout this video, I'm going to be taking you through just so you can see how much some Pokemon cards are booming, and we are actually in another bull run. Though one area to understand is that when we're in a hype period, it's really good to have a community to guide you, especially as a newcomer. So if it is your first time here, my name is Phil. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel to be kept up to date with Pokemon investing updates and news. And to double down on community, I have just created my official Discord server, which has been way more fun than I expected. We're currently building a fantastic community of people. We're all showing off our trading card pools and our latest investments. I'd honestly love to have you on board, and the server invite can be found within the description of this video. Now, it should be noted, right, and I always say this, right? It's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market. Though when you are in these bull runs, if you've got cards that you are not that fond of, if you've got cards that you want to sell, if you've got some PSA 10 slabs that you are not that much of a fan of, now is the opportunity to sell and get good prices. You're not gonna always have a mix to get this perfect storm. You've got TCG Pocket really bringing in a lot of demand. You've got all these products selling out. You've got a lot of people who are looking in the hobby. You've got a lot of people returning. Obviously, if you're like me, I really like holding for the longer game. But if there are cards that you want to sell at the moment, these are the times. Right now is the opportunity, because you rarely get these bull runs. These runs come every 4 years, and right now you want to capitalize on that, right? Because in 2020 and 2021, when vintage cards were booming out of control, that was the time to acquire your profits. That was the time to sell. If you sold in 2023 or 2024, some of the prices dropped 40%, 50%, you would have made far less money. And that's why it's important to know how these cycles behave, right? And a big thing a lot of people talk about, we like talking about Pokemon cards and that they're gonna grow and all this, but the reality is there is cycles of this hobby. There is moments where a lot of eyes are on the hobby. And the thing is, and I'm gonna try to say this as politely as I can, and not to offend anyone in any way, but when newcomers re-enter the hobby, they are slightly naive with their purchases, okay? And we have all been here as well. So I'm not actually putting any shade of any newcomers who are entering the hobby. Everyone's welcome, but one of the key aspects is when people re-enter the hobby, they have their nostalgia lenses on. They almost have beer goggles on when they're walking into the hobby. So what they do is they're looking at cards they used to collect. They're looking at damaged copies of cards. They're looking at cards that wouldn't really sell for well priced, out of cycle market, and they're buying with emotional decisions. So this is kind of a good time that if you got cards that you don't want to have, or you're not too much of a fan of, you can sell them and you probably can get a good price. Though at the same time, if you are re-entering the hobby, I have to tell you, because there's a lot of people who are experienced in Pokemon collecting, Pokemon investing, you don't want to now be buying too much in a bull run. You want to be very strategic with what you buy, because it's very easy right now to load up on Umbreon VMAX. It's easy now to load up on Pikachu from Surging Sparks. You might be buying the Greninja from Twilight Masquerade. You might be buying all these chase cards. The problem is we are in a very big hype bubble, and of course this will one day settle as well. I don't think it's going to settle that quickly because Prismatic Evolutions and the Team Rocket set is on the way, but I do think towards the tail end of 2025, this kind of huge hype period will just slowly come down a little, and then it's going to keep going down until another hype period comes up. But yes, it is very true that we are right now in a very big bull run, and this is where, experienced collectors and people who collect a lot need to make make their plays strategically. And this is the big thing, because when people say, oh, you collect Pokemon cards, you're investing in Pokemon, what have you, the purpose of this is to capitalize when you can, and of course load up when you can. Because we've seen a lot of people, man, I've seen a lot of videos of people buying binders full of cards. They've bought so many products back in 2020 and all those cards are now worth nothing. It's because you also have to know what cards to buy. You can't just buy holo cards or shiny Pokemon cards and you're gonna think that they're gonna grow in value. There are certain cards, certain characteristics, and all that what you need to look out for which will grow in value. The exact same rationale comes with Pokemon cards. It's not just about buying, oh, that's a Charizard, that's a shiny card. No, you need to look into more aspects. Does it have fan demand? Does it have any lore behind it which made it kind of popular, similar to Gogh Pikachu? Does it have a bit of a story behind it? Okay, base set Charizard is a good example of this. Moonbryon is another great example of this. Has a bit of story behind it, what made it iconic. You know, these aspects we need to look in when we look at investing in collectibles. They cannot just be, oh, it's a shiny Pokemon card, oh, it's a rare card. Of course it's rare, but in 10 years or 15 years, if not enough people remember the card or not enough people have an emotional connection to the card, it's never gonna get the price it has today. Golden Snorlax from Chilling Reign is a perfect example of this. This card was one of the most desired cards from Chilling Reign when it released, and right now it's not selling for anywhere near the price it was in 2021, and I'm pretty confident that in 10 years from now, it's probably not going to get that price either, because the buyer market won't have the nostalgia to always draw back to it. When I look at a Moonbryon, okay, Umbreon VMAX, I can see that definitely in 15 years time, there will still be a demand for that card because it has the story, has a bit of lore behind it, okay, has a bit of an emotional connection for a lot of people who collected during the COVID boom. It has a lot of things going for it. Evolving Skies, it was like a renaissance period for Pokemon collecting. I do think that the Giratina V and the Gengar VMAX also fit this category. But then something maybe like an Urshifu VMAX from Battle Styles, even though it's a really cool card and it's quite valuable, maybe in 10 years time it won't hold the value. That's why it's important to kind of understand the thought process when it comes to collectibles. Though, let's get into the pricing. So the first one is Pikachu with a gray felt hat, or Gogh Pikachu. Now this card is kind of going up with this run that we're in at the moment. Now what's interesting about this card is it's quite iconic and it does have a lot of story behind it. If you weren't around when Gogh Pikachu released, Gogh Pikachu became a bit of a meme in the Pokemon world. What happened was it kind of was the only way to purchase it was when you visited the Gogh Museum, and because of that, everyone that went to the Gogh Museum, there was literally videos and footage of people jumping over on top of one another. So it does have a little bit of a story behind it, okay? Pokemon did actually notice that this was a problem, so what they actually did was they said, hey, if you buy a Gogh product from the Pokemon Center store and you spend over a certain amount, we will send the Gogh Pikachu card if you follow that criteria. Now I'm gonna pull this into the year graph, and as you can see, last year this was selling for 162 USD, and you can see that this dropped all the way down to 83 USD, and it kind of held that range for a while, and you can see in September it was selling for around 91 USD. Still quite a significant drop from that 160. I'm gonna pull that into the last 3 months, and you can see that this is actually climbing quite high, and right now it's selling for $178. It has actually reached a new high in the market. I do think this card has a lot of unique characteristics that fit in that strong collectible category, particularly because it did have that kind of whole drama around the Gogh Museum, and I do think it is quite a unique card, along with being a Pikachu, so there is a few things going for this card that really check the collection boxes, okay? In my mind, I do think that this card could continue to grow. It does have a very, very high pop report at PSA 10, and because of that, there is a lot of supply in the world. But given the fact that the hobby is growing, sometimes people will look at the figures and they'll say, oh, there's 11,000 cards in PSA 10 of this card, and oh, there's 15,000 of this card in PSA 10. Problem is, we cannot look at those pop reports with the past kind of numbers, because you have to remember a lot of collectors are entering Pokemon collecting and investing at the moment, and a lot of collectors are also seeing the value of graded cards, and a lot of people like their PSA 10 copies. There is a huge influx of people who understand the importance of grading. When the 2020 boom happened in 2021, it was more the niche collectors who understood how important grading cards were. Now grading cards and having PSA 10 copies is very much in the mainstream. When I collected back in the day, okay, you would hear pockets of those very committed collectors who graded their cards. It was far more common in the sport collecting circles. For TCG, it wasn't that common. Right now though, grading your cards is incredibly common, it's very popular, and it's done with nearly every card you can find. You gotta remember now that there is a higher buyer market available of collectors who like graded cards. Moving forward, we have the Rayquaza VMAX from Evolving Skies, and I'm in the last 3 months. You can see this was selling for 382 USD, and right now, look at that boom, it's selling for 466. This is in the last 3 months, nearly $100 increase. This card right now is showing some real fire in its belly. I think that this Rayquaza can reach some new high points in the market, considering how popular of a Pokemon it is, considering how in demand Evolving Skies is, considering how expensive Evolving Skies booster boxes are. Moving along here, we can also see the Lugia V from Silver Tempest. Now you can see this was selling for around $162 in September, and right now it's selling for $182. Nothing substantial, but a $20 increase has happened. I'm going to be very interested to see if this can exceed its previous high of $227. I do think it can. I do think now Silver Tempest is still available. You can still get it quite easily, but as the years go on, this Lugia V is literally one of the only cards from Silver Tempest that has any worth, right? So because of that, I do think it's very in demand. Moving forward to another interesting card, which is the Groudon from Paradox Rift, which is an illustration rare. Now, what's interesting as well, it is an illustration rare card, so it doesn't have the textures of a special illustration rare. I'm going to pull that into the year graph, and you can see this one had a huge boom in March earlier this year from 23 USD, and then it went to 64 USD. Then you can see now it dropped to around 46 USD. If we pull this in the last 3 months, you can see this card is climbing quite rapidly again, and it's on 65 USD at the moment. Do I think that this Groudon can keep going? I do, because personally, I think this is one of the most desired cards from Paradox Rift, which is interesting as well because it is an illustration rare. I do think if this Groudon was an SIR, I personally believe that this Groudon would be one of the most expensive cards within the Scarlet and Violet era, but because it was an illustration rare, it did kind of calm its demand down a little bit. Moving forward again, we can see the Magikarp illustration rare. Now, again, another illustration rare card and a very expensive illustration rare. I'm going to pull that in the 6-month timeline. You can see this one went from $150 all the way down to $104, and you can see I'm going to pull that into the 3 months, and you can see this is now climbing again. Right now, it's selling for $157. It is at a new high. This Magikarp, if I pull that in the month graph, you can see there is a very steady increase happening with this card at the moment. I will be interested to see if this can become a $200 card. Moving forward, another one in this bull run that is rising a little bit is the Draginite V, selling for 123 USD, right now selling for 146. I do think this Draginite V is one to look out for. I do think a lot of people are going to be looking back at Evolving Skies, and especially because we have this new influx of collectors, they're going to be looking at these older Evolving Skies sets, the sets they collected during COVID, and they're going to be more drawn into these cards. Now, moving on to another one that is really exceeding, and this is in the last 6 months. You can see the Charmander Pokemon Center stamped promo was selling for 22 USD. Right now, the raw copy is selling for 80 USD. If you can find this card in a PSA 10 copy, they are selling for some absurd amounts. The PSA 10 copy of this Charmander is very expensive at the moment and is definitely one to keep an eye out for. Though it does really bring the question with all these cards that are so expensive, how can you actually collect all these Pokemon cards on a budget? Well, I do answer the 5 best ways to collect Pokemon cards on a budget within this video here. Within this video that's appearing on screen right now, I'll look over the 5 best ways to collect Pokemon cards while managing life at the same time. If you're interested in that video, click that video that's appearing on screen and I'll see you there.